Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The bill is passed.
We'd like to get a budget that represents the interests of the people who are standing here with me now.
To be part of the struggle to achieve a better society for all.
Hello, I'm Carrie Warner, and I'd like to welcome you to the Assembly Update. My guest today is Joe Dragone, Superintendent of Ballston Spa Schools, and we're here to talk about education funding, the Gap Elimination Adjustment, early college high school programs, and other topics related to education. Joe, thank you so much for joining me.
Great, thank you for the invitation.
You know, we have talked many times about the impact of the Gap Elimination Adjustment, the impact of foundation aid on schools, and I'm wondering if you could start us off by talking about what the impact of the Gap Elimination Adjustment has been to you and what the current school funding situation means to the Ballston Spa Schools.
Sure, great, and thank you again. The GEA, as it's finally referred to as the Gap Elimination Adjustment, we're talking about 10 years worth of aid reductions that are yet to be restored. So you're looking at, over time, really getting back to aid levels where we were 10 years ago. For Ballston Spa, currently it's about $1.4 million. Some of that was restored in the initial proposal, about less than a third of it. So even taking what's on the table, the district is still owed almost $1 million in GEA restoration. And it's been incredibly difficult and compounded by the fact that the foundation aid formula hasn't run. And since 1990, that hasn't really functioned as a formula per se. It's constantly altered and changed over time for many, many years. So those two things interacting really are a fiscal challenge for the district. Over time, we still are about 27 teachers less than we were when we started. So there's always challenges. It's programmatic challenges, which are really driven by financial challenges. Foundation aid, as it stands, our increase in the proposed budget is about $40,000. So it's about $9.50 a student. So that, combined with the back aid, GEA, that is still owed to get us up to current levels, is a significant fiscal problem.
Right, and I know that for all the schools that I represent in the 113th Assembly District, it's about $4.3 million is the total amount of Gap Elimination Adjustment funds that are still due back to the schools. So it's a challenge for all the schools, not just one district.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And in this tax cap environment as well, that creates additional fiscal strain for those of you who are planning for the future. So I'm wondering if you could reflect a few minutes on the tax cap and what it's done, good and bad, to the schools.
Sure. The cap is incredibly interesting. The most, believe it or not, challenging part about the cap is it's not 2%. And that colloquial 2% that it's been referred to for some time now is very challenging in the field when we have to explain how the cap really works. And that 2% or less than of CPI is one part of a very complex formula. So the whole notion of 2% is challenging in and of itself when we're dealing with our stakeholders, our school communities, talking about the fiscal impact on districts. So untangling that and going back and forth, our cap has ranged over the past many years from as low as -3% to as high as 5.5%. So it's really a constant moving target based on a lot of those factors.
Right.
So the reality is, when we have our discussions about what the cap means and how it plays out, is incredibly is challenging, because we want to make sure everybody understands the implications and how that works. And it's different for every single school district. Cap in and of itself, I have always said, frankly, that there's always been a cap. It's a no vote. And the reality is, when communities, I think an unintended consequence as this continues to move on is districts ultimately are becoming, especially on a more wealthier continuum, more dependent, believe it or not, on state aid, because the ability to raise local revenue has been limited. So as it continues to work itself out, and if a district has a tax cap of 0.5%, where it's a wealthier district, where under normal circumstances they would leave it to their local residents to make the decision on what they want to invest, I think that all of this has implications to the prior when it comes to state aid as well.
Right. I think that it's what I have long found is remarkable is the ability for the superintendents in schools to really be innovative and think about how to deliver the same quality education and increasing quality of education to our students in light of a fiscally constrained environment. And I really give a lot of credit to you and to your colleagues for the great work that you do, the great work that the teachers do to keep the students front and center in this conversation, all the while trying to manage in a very complex financial environment and a constrained financial environment.
Well, I really appreciate that. I know my colleagues do, especially in 113th as well. And the reality is when we remain mission-centric, and we talk about this all the time, especially during budget, when we talk about what really is a social sector organization, what are we accomplishing and what are we going to put in place and how are we going to face those challenges to continue to deliver on our mission is really important conversation. And I think when we get back to that, when we talk about our programs, that allows us to set the stage for the decisions that we make.
Right. Changing the focus just a little bit, some number of years ago the state did a pilot program for early college high school programs and the P-TECH grants, and you were really a leader in taking advantage of that program and putting in place a new trailblazing program for early college high school on sustainability and clean technologies in partnership with Hudson Valley Community College. And just this past week, we had the Commissioner of State Ed and the Board of Regents member locally because this program is really a leader in the state. And I was hoping that you might share a little bit about the program and how it has grown over time and why increased funding in this year's budget for P-TECH programs for early college high school is really critical for the state as a whole.
Yeah, sure. It's such a, we're so proud of this work, I'll say up front. We're blessed to have an incredibly strong leadership team in place that leads this work regionally. And it was really, our roots go back to 2010. Prior to this really, frankly, taking root in New York State, we visited schools in Ohio. We have national partners in North Carolina and in Colorado and different national leadership organizations about how these early college high schools work. So we piloted a program. It was us and it was Saratoga Springs Schools. It was about 22 students in 11 and 12. And then after that, early college high schools, second round was rolled out and we applied for that and we were fortunate to receive some of that financial support. And then ultimately 2 years ago, the P-TECH. The initial round of P-TECH came out and we were fortunate to be in that first cohort as well. So what we have done is just taken our model and really building these bridges. We call it the three-legged stool with higher education, K-12 education, and all of our business partners. And it's the collaboration around this that drives our program. So our humble roots of 22 students, now we enroll almost 300 students through all 10 counties in the economic development region and 2 counties beyond. So we're very proud of the small footprint but broad regional impact that we're having. And students study clean energy, computer information systems, leadership and entrepreneurship, as well as semiconductor manufacturing or mechatronics, as it's called in the field now. So they can complete beyond high school in 1 more year their associate's degree at Hudson Valley and certifications in these areas and ultimately go right to the workforce in our own backyard.
Yeah, I was at a Global Foundries open house this past fall and met a young man who had come through the program, finished his associate's degree at Hudson Valley, and was there talking to people about the work that he's doing. And he had the biggest smile on his face. You know, it really is working to prepare kids for a career right in our backyard in the new technologies businesses that are springing up here. It's a terrific program, and you're to be commended for being a leader in that. And we've also we've got another one in the region through Queensbury schools and SUNY Adirondack. So our region is clearly a leader in this kind of advanced education for our high school students.
And it's really, it's different thinking, and it's really bringing the partners to the table. We have over 45 partners in business and industry and across sectors. And Global Foundries is a huge partner, and we appreciate their support. And Cisco and TRC are some of our lead partners. But whether it's Gilbane and CS Arch and all the financial institutions, BSNB, Adirondack Trust, I mean, the list goes on, whether it is a local corporation like Specialty Silicone Products, you know, right down, you know, or Geisen, both right down the road from our high school, or national leaders or international leaders like Cisco and Global Foundries, and IBM provides support as well as part of P-TECH. It's really, it's bringing these folks together to think differently about the work and frankly shape new opportunities for kids.
Right, and it's not just the high performing students or the high potential students. It's students from all all parts of the educational spectrum that are finding some real excitement in this program. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really the learning, which is our focus, is really the teaching and learning. I think that's really what we're most proud of. And it's called, not to use ed jargon, is transdisciplinary learning, which is beyond doing a project. You know, we start with a problem. What local or national problem do kids want to solve? And they take their learning across content areas and work on solving those problems. So it's really problem-based learning, which focuses on critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity and innovation, the 4 C's that we call them, that completely reshapes what can happen in a classroom. So when kids are engaged in groups, and that's what we hear from the workforce, this is how you're going to work. Ultimately, when you get out of high school and get out of college, you know, how can we continue to support what will make them better higher education students and make them better employees down the road? So that whole lens of looking long term and providing those supports along the way has a lot to do with the work.
I can certainly see where programs like this, if we could find the funding to ensure that they could spring up all over the state, would really help make New York State a leader in workforce development for the future. I think it's great.
I couldn't agree more. You know, everybody talks workforce pipeline, and you know, especially in our region here, really we're at the epicenter of a lot of this work, and SUNY and a lot of the folks have done the work over time about how many graduates really go on, graduate, and end up employed in our region. This seizes that opportunity, and like I said, our 45 plus partners, just tremendous support. So continued financial support. I know that there has been effort into continuing to scale the model, but those of us in cohort 1, especially as we work through these cycles, to be able to continue that support will help keep the program in place.
Yeah, the public-private model is a really powerful one, and one that I think is key to the success of this program generally.
Yeah, I would agree 100%, absolutely.
I want to turn to one other topic, and that is community schools. This has been some significant discussion in last year's budget cycle. It is once again coming up. The desirability of providing wraparound services in schools that are struggling to help address some of the community problems that face kids and families outside of the classroom and are reflected in the challenges the teachers face inside the classroom. And I know that in the last couple of years, you've taken steps to start putting some services around the Ballston Spa schools, and I'm wondering if you could spend a few minutes on that as well.
Sure. About 2 years ago, we launched our first mental health clinic in the schools in partnership with Parsons Northeast, who's in our region and really are the leaders in the region in providing those kinds of services to kids and families. And the reality is how, when we were looking in the mirror and we see the challenges that our kids have, we see the challenges that our families have as well, families in crisis, kids in crisis. You know, how can we talk about teaching and learning when the reality is there's so much instability in what might be going on in their lives? So it was about how can we get these services in the schools to provide supports for the kids. And 2 years ago, we opened our first mental health clinic. Again, it's a licensed mental health clinic by Parsons, who co-locates the services for the kids and families in our schools. We have social workers, we have psychiatrists, they can do med adjustments, they can meet with families. You know, we found the reality is a lot of our families who need these services can't make the trip to Glens Falls at 4:30 in the afternoon. You have parents that work 2 jobs. You know, summer is a completely different conversation and break. So the ability to do that was something that we wanted to provide. And it's expanded to 2 clinics, and we have a waiting list, you know, so our services are well received.
And we were talking earlier, and you shared with me that you're actually seeing absenteeism go down. You've prevented hospitalizations, and so it's clearly having a very positive effect.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the students and the families.
Well, congratulations on all the great work and all the great things that are happening in Ballston Spa.
Great.
It is really a pleasure to be able to be an advocate for public education in our region and to support the efforts to restore the Gap Elimination Adjustment, increased funding for P-TECH and early college high school, so we can expand that model across the state and really grow our workforce. And then community schools and the efforts that you're doing in finding a public-private model to deliver these services to help our families. It's really, you know, this is important work that we're doing, and it's great to have you as a partner. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us today for the Assembly Update. Thanks.